city. This is Charlie Rose.
Rosewater is a new movie by Jon Stewart. It is his directorial debut. It is based on the real-life experience of Maziar Bahari. He is an Iranian-born journalist who returned to Tehran in 2009 to cover the presidential election. He was accused of being an American spy, was sent to prison, was tortured by Iranian authorities until his release. Variety magazine calls the movie a stirring account of human endurance and a topical reminder of the risks faced by journalists in pursuit of the truth. Here is the trailer for Rosewater.
It's crazy how, you're 1 month pregnant and you're already like this.
Go away.
It's just 1 week.
Welcome to Iran. Are you here for business or pleasure?
I'm a journalist. I'm covering the elections for Newsweek magazine.
Ahmadinejad is devoted to the supreme leader. Ahmadinejad is what must be.
Don't you want to report the other side?
We are the educated.
So you're a student?
We are the educated.
Welcome to Dish University.
Why did you put away your camera when you saw the satellites?
There are certain situations that if you film them, it won't do your friends or the movement any good.
Tensions are rising in Iran.
The election has ended in controversy.
What are you doing? Fighting back! You're gonna get killed, come on!
You have a real weapon and you choose not to use it.
Stand up. We are here now.
Sir, can you tell me why I'm here?
That's what happened to foreign spies caught on Iranian soil. You are a spy. Who are you working for? The CIA? Newsweek? MI6?
You will tell them nothing.
There's nothing to tell.
Where's Anton Chekhov?
Anton Chekhov? The playwright?
Yeah, you tell me. It is you who has listed an interest of him on Facebook. Answer the questions! You must not just take his blood. You must take his hope. Your wife will never see you again. Your child will never know you.
Fight, Ozzy. Use your freedom. Use their weakness.
What are you doing?
They locked you up, but you're still free.
In their hearts, they know they cannot win.
It's an unbelievable movie, isn't it?
Unbelievable movie. The movie's only 30 seconds longer than the trailer. It's only about 20, 30 seconds longer.
In case you don't know, that's Jon Stewart talking. He is the director of the film. Gael Garcia Bernal is the star, and Maziar Bahari, on whom this movie is based, also joins us. I am really pleased to have him here. Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. To all of you.
Thanks.
Thanks.
So you see your life on screen.
Yes, it's really weird. Because it usually happens to people like Nelson Mandela or Mahatma Gandhi, people of that stature, but people who are dead. So the good thing is that I'm not dead, but still it's quite weird to see your life on screen.
Tell me what is it made this the movie that you thought you wanted to be involved with? I mean, I realized he'd been on your show, he'd been on my show, so you knew him.
Well, we knew after Maziar had been arrested in 2009, after he was released, he came on the show and we became friendly. We started just meeting for breakfast downtown, and he was writing his memoir at that time. And we talked about trying to make this into a film, the memoir, which is incredibly compelling because it's also, you know, Maziar was in prison. His father had been imprisoned under the Shah, his sister under Khomeini. So you have these generations lost to these regimes that are suppressing their people, not just against the West, allied with the West. So it's this incredible sort of generational story as well. So we were trying to get it made into a film. We made lists of writers that we loved. And
but wait a minute. I mean, you were trying to get it made into. Was there a moment and you said, I want to make a film? I want to see a film made about this. Was it when you read this? Was it when you got involved in the story?
When Maziar when we used to meet for breakfast, and we thought it was just, it's something that I thought was a really relevant topic to today's, the way that information has been democratized, the changing definition of who is a journalist, who is not a journalist, the way that these 20th century regimes have to find a way to suppress a new medium of information. I just thought it was very compelling, along with the really amazing sort of observations that he made while in prison, the humor that he was able to maintain, the family story. I just thought it was beautifully done.
Had you been looking for a film to make, produce, direct?
Oh, no. That part, no. I mean, if the Police Academy came my way, I wouldn't turn it down. You know,
you missed that.
Get back in the game. But no, not at all. This was, and I was going to produce it.
Yeah.
I think that our first conversations was about family and humor, the film, because, I mean, Jon is a satirist and comedian, I think.
Something
along those lines. So he was interested in the humor in the book, but also he was interested in the family aspect of it, because even in the film, the main characters are two male characters, Gael and Kim Bodnia, who are the more amazing in the film, protagonists of the film. But the heart and soul of the film really belongs to three amazing women: my mother, my sister, and my wife, who are portrayed by three amazing actresses. So during those first breakfasts, maybe 6 or 7 first breakfasts, we kept on talking about humor in the book and humor in the story, and also the family, the women in my life.
And so how do you find humor in this?
I didn't. He did. That was his fault. Well, I think it was, you know, in some respects, it's a test case for what you always imagine, but it's hypothetical. This idea that even under the most duress, even under the most oppressive conditions, humor can be a shield. It's what separates you from those that believe they have a monopoly on the truth. These authoritarian type regimes, and to see Maziar be able to retain that, and have to somehow find a way to keep himself alive, keep his own humanity alive, and finding the humor in what was truly an absurd situation. They accused him of being a spy. He's not a spy, and as evidence, they showed him a clip from The Daily Show, where Jason Jones, in a keffiyeh and sunglasses, says to him in a cafe, "As an American spy, I'm a spy. Tell me, why is your country so terrifying?" They played that for him.
And it shouldn't be that strange to you, because you interviewed Ahmadinejad, I don't know, 7 or 8 times. I'm sure, I mean, you may not admit it, but I'm sure sometimes after the interview, you would just say to yourself, this guy is just ridiculous.
Yeah, of course I did.
You did, okay.
Yes,
exactly. So imagine being interrogated by Ahmadinejad and being repeated everything that he said in those half-an-hour interview to you for 118 days. So eventually my interrogator really became my muse. So when I was being interrogated in the interrogation room, and after I went to my cell, I was just thinking about our conversations, and I was rehearsing it in my head. And all I did after coming out of prison was just transcribing all those observations and ridiculous conversations that we had.
Al, welcome. It's good to see you again.
Good to see you as well. Thank you.
How did you get involved? When did Jon call you and say, "I've got a great part for you"?
Not long. I mean, not a long time before shooting it. I mean, it was like 3 months before.
We had to find Gael deep in the jungles of the Amazon.
Play another revolutionary.
He was in a loincloth running through the jungles of the Amazon. That's true.
Yeah. I was playing a psychedelic Rambo kind of character, and so the change was very, very exciting.
But you come from a place where they've seen dictators as well.
Well, yeah. I mean, we've seen an institutionalized dictatorship.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so, when you read the book and when you read the script, did you say, "Wow, this is the story I have to tell"?
And I'm glad you asked me, like, stating that I come from, because it feels so far away, but it's true that it is so similar in many ways, and I felt much in touch with Maziar's story, even though I've never been in solitary confinement, of course, but there was something, I mean, there is something that sparks very humane, that it was a very interesting, strong connection. And also through Jon's interpretation as well, it made it, it amplified the situation. It is not just about Maziar's story in prison. It's about all these many issues, like torture, humor, for example. Humor is naturally reflective, for example, but on a distance, you can tell that every single situation in the history of mankind, of power doing something to try to control, or in a critical moment trying to control something, some people, a movement, they've always used ridiculous excuses. And on a distance, I mean, the Inquisition was something terrible, but the Inquisition used quite ridiculous statements to sustain their actions.
Ignorance is universal and eternal at the same time. And it's great that I think first time I met Gael, I was just shocked by how much he knows about the situation. So he's not only a great actor, but he's very knowledgeable about the politics of the Middle East, politics of Iran. He makes documentaries, he has a documentary festival, so he's not one of those actors who don't know where Iran is on the map. He knew Iranian history, so it was just the details that we had to talk about.
John, tell me about going into the making of the film. I mean, here you are having a daily show, you take 12 weeks off.
Correct.
You're going to go to Amman, Jordan. You're going to make a movie.
That's right.
You've written the script. You've got the cast you want. What's surprising? What was terrifying about all this?
It's not so much it was the most terrifying thing about the project is not to let Maziar down. You know, when you're telling somebody's story, you feel a great responsibility to tell it with integrity, to reflect. You know, his memoir is a reflection of his time in prison. This film is naturally going to be an impression of that reflection. So it's already twice removed. I'm not Iranian, so I'm not going to have the same nuanced ear that a great Iranian director is going to have. So within that, it's sort of owning your own inauthenticity while trying to best express the more universal elements of the story and not screw it up. To be perfectly frank, is to just do justice to what he went through and to be able to articulate that story with the proper intention and in a way that dramatizes it the way that we thought was appropriate.
But did you seek advice from other directors? Did you say, at least I want to touch these bases before I go to make my first film?
No question. And I, as someone like yourself, you interview people, so you can have directors on the show. So we would have a director on the show to talk about a project, and I would find my way back to the green room and say, "Oh, yay, Ron, Howard, it's so good to have you on the show. I've got this script." And I would, very kind, very generous. Some of that was to get a sense of their feeling of the viability of it, for them to, it wasn't so much, you're act one, you need conflict. Yeah, right. It was more, this is a viable story. I think this is something you could accomplish in the time frame and with the money. We had very little money and very little time. So was this a realistic endeavor is one of the things I was looking to do. Yes. There were two yeses, one not sure, and one I'm awfully busy. Please get out of my room. No, but in general, the feedback was quite positive, so that felt good.
Tell me about the relationship between, he's playing you, and the interrogator, who's a very different kind of man, yet at the same time, your lives are totally entwined there.
Well, my main challenge in prison was to humanize my interrogator, look at him as a human being, because I knew if I regarded him as a monster, I would be defeated from the beginning. And I knew I was fighting two different battles. One was a physical battle that was lost, of course, because I was the prisoner. He was the part of the Revolutionary Guards. He was much bigger than me. But the other part was the other battle was a psychological battle that I knew I could win, because I had lived a richer life, I had a richer cultural experience, I loved my family much more than he did, I was sure I had friends, and I knew if he had the same experience that I had, he wouldn't choose being a torturer, because that's a horrible job when you think about it. You have to go to a dark room every day, punch card, beat people, insult people, humiliate people, lie, and think that you're going to paradise eventually, and then go back home, or may not go home, get overtime. So I had to fight this psychological battle with him through getting into my inner resources, my cultural experience, and just humanize him and see the complexities in him, see the vulnerabilities in him, and try to manipulate that. First of all, for very practical reasons, that to stop him from beating me and insulting me, and also to satisfy him as an employee of the system. Because like any other employee, like bookkeepers, accountants, he had a boss, and he had to give some information to his boss. So I had to give him some information that would not hurt me eventually, but at the same time satisfy him. So the scenes with the massages that people will see that you've seen in the film, that is part of that plan that I had in my head, concocted in my head.
You've said, Jon, that Gael brought oxygen to the room, to the role. What did you mean?
It was a very delicate balance for the actor who was going to play Maziar to play. As Maziar said earlier, he's still alive. So he was there with us on set. So
you can kind of tell him if he got it.
Exactly. So there's the pressure of, you're playing Maziar and you could hear from maybe offset a little of this. No,
not there.
No. What are you doing?
It wasn't that way.
But it was more. It was more about the agility. I think sometimes for an actor, when you have to play a scene of duress, it's very easy to play it in all of its fullness. And one of the things that I think was always so interesting to me about Maziar was his ability to maintain a sense of that mischief, to compartmentalize the ordeal and remain like, even without an audience, a hint of, this is absurd, and keep that. Gael caught that from the beginning, from the moment,
the absurdity of it all.
The absurdity, but to be able to play that as subtext under duress is what was so special. And when he came in, there's a scene in the film where Maziar gets to call his wife for the first time in 4 months. And it's maybe 2 minutes, and there's no cuts, and it's one camera, locked in tight. Gael had to go from fear about being about to be beaten into incredulity that he's about to get to call his wife, who he's wanted to talk to the whole time, into the joy of hearing that he's about to have a baby girl, to being physically assaulted, to laughing in the face of his interrogator and flipping the script, to gratitude. That's 2 minutes. And he had to accomplish that without the ostentatious trappings of acting. It's one of those scenes that you could very easily chew on in a way, but he brought a subtlety and a nuance to it and an agility to it that was really, really special.
Now, are you instructing him? Are you telling him what you want from him?
I was not on set. I don't like to watch movies being made. I like to watch them.
Yes. This is a new definition of director.
It was a really collaborative process all the way through, from start to finish.
That's what makes it interesting, isn't it? I mean, you have somebody who wants to learn and listen and go forward as you do as an actor. Yeah,
it was such a joy. I mean, we had many situations that kind of made it complicated, like shooting in during Ramadan in very strong heat. I mean, now that I remember, it was actually really boiling inside.
100 degrees, 110 degrees.
Yeah, it was very, very, very difficult. Some things that we had to do. Also working with, we all met each other there, so we had to come up with something, and there's a joy and expectation and a complete panic and terror of what is this gonna take shape, where is this gonna lead us, and so little by little we started. I mean, I remember on the second week I felt had already been like 2 months there. It felt like such an intensity. It was a really joyful project.
You're filming inside a prison in Oman.
I'm sorry?
You're filming inside a prison in Oman, Jordan.
Our first 4 days of filming were at a working prison in Oman. So you can imagine, and it's not like, look, when you're on a location in New York, you get a lot of like, hey, what are you guys shooting? But that's not, it's not like the prisoners are coming up and like, is this a commercial? Who's the actor? Like, it's very tense. And you're trying not to humiliate them because they're undergoing this, and you want to be respectful of the conditions that they're under, and the conditions that the guards are under, and the conditions of the beginning of the holiday of Ramadan. So it was delicate.
To also because we were in the ward, or the wing,
the solitary one,
where the solitary confinement occurs, and to witness that, and for me, that I was new into the. I mean, they had all been preparing, and for me, that I was new into this, into the notion of solitary confinement in a way. Realizing that this is something that happens everywhere in the world and it is common practice. it was quite. I mean, I cannot say, I don't know, harrowing in a way. I mean, it is the. I mean, Maziar says it's the most effective way of torture, no, to put people in solitary confinement.
And the worst thing is to
and
feel
we do it here. We keep people in solitary confinement as a matter of course, as a matter of behavioral correction, and it's something that breaks people down psychologically in terrible ways and really quickly.
Speaking of that, you took an approach to torture. You did not want to engage, in your words, torture porn.
Correct.
You really wanted it to be a bit like Jaws.
Yes.
The fear of.
Yes, the suspense of it, the imminent nature, the fact that it was always in the air. Because I felt that, and Maziar and I talked a lot about this, an audience can become numb when viewing something brutal so that it loses its impact. In the same way that a prisoner can become numb through repeated physical torture, they develop an immunity to it to some extent, and it no longer carries impact. So when the violence occurs, it cracks like lightning. It appears out of nowhere, and it disappears as quickly, but it always hangs in the air. And I felt that it was a way to invest the audience in it in maybe a more complete way, in a more visceral way, than sort of giving a more lurid presentation of it so that it becomes something that you are numb to watch. As you see, you see very violent things on television all the time, and we don't seem to register them. So I wanted to find a way to accentuate the difficulty of it without necessarily letting people off the hook. In the same way that once Maziar goes to prison, we don't leave the prison to give the audience.
They got to stay there.
You're pushing a bit of the line of discomfort, so that then when that discomfort is released, they feel that viscerally as well.
Was the fear of the punishment worse than the punishment?
The solitary confinement was the worst, because what happens in solitary confinement is that they deprive you of all your senses. Everything you see, it's just the walls. You cannot touch anything except for the walls. You cannot hear anything. So because of that, you become delusional. You feel lonely. You become suicidal. And sometimes, actually, during my time in solitary confinement, I really wanted to be interrogated. I really wanted to even be beaten, because I wanted to have some sort of human contact and not be in the cell all by myself for 2 weeks and 3
What
3
was
weeks.
the worst for you?
The solitary confinement.
Did it come after 10 days or after 20 days? Or, was it immediate, that the sense that I'm here, I have no control over my future? I don't even know who knows where I am and what they're doing to me.
You don't know anything. I mean, the only way that you communicate with the rest of the world is through your interrogator. And his job is to tell you that no one cares about you, that no one does anything for you, that you're going to rot here if you don't collaborate. So that is just a fear. And that's why in the film we have that really joyous Mr. Hillary Clinton moment, because one of my guards mistakenly called me Mr. Hillary Clinton one day. And there and then I knew that the rest of the world is thinking about me because Hillary Clinton was talking about me. That was the best day of my, I cannot say best day because I don't think there were good days, so this is best.
Not a lot of great
days. You don't have too many good days. It was the least of the worst days. Yeah.
Take a look at this. This is a scene in which we talk about what you saw in the trailer, the idea of crushing hope. Here it is.
You will tell me, or they will tell me. Oh no. Say it!
You have the wrong people, sir. These are not...
You must not just take his blood, Jabadi. You must take his hope. Yes, sir.
As the Hajaga.
Yeah.
He was the boss.
Rosewater's boss. He's very good.
Yeah.
He was in Homeland as well.
Yeah.
Where is he from?
Egypt.
Egypt. Okay.
Egyptian American.
And how do they go about trying to crush your hope?
Basically by putting me in solitary confinement and by telling me that I was going to be executed if I did not name names. Because the main reason for my imprisonment was to incriminate the reformists within the Iranian government through me. So my interrogation was not really about my work as a journalist. On the first day, they told me that I was a spy for CIA, Mossad, MI6, and Newsweek. And when I said Newsweek, you mean the magazine? They said, your quote-unquote magazine is part of the intelligence apparatus. So they wanted me to name the names of reformists and tell them that, yes, I put, for example, Rafsanjani or Khatami in touch with British embassy or CIA. And they were telling me that, just write down whatever we ask you. Don't worry about it. If you tell us that you put these people in touch with Foreign Intelligence Agency, I promise that you're going to be released tomorrow. And of course, I knew that many people had been executed because of these false confessions. So my challenge was to confess falsely, but not to incriminate anyone.
All right, take a look at this before we move too far. This is the Daily Show issue that was used as evidence, Jason Jones interviewing. Here it is.
As a spy, I'm just trying to figure out why your country is so terrifying.
The first thing to know about Iran is that it is not evil. Actually, Americans and Iranians have a lot of things in common, more than they have differences.
What do I have in common with you?
What is the number one enemy of the United States?
Al-Qaeda.
Al-Qaeda is also the number one enemy of Iran. The Al-Qaeda members say that if you kill an Iranian or if you kill a Shiite, you go to heaven and you get 72 virgins.
Well, they won't be virgins for too long, huh? Right? You know what I'm saying? Upstairs. No.
I run a very stupid show. I really don't have anything to say. Mazhar's a very brave man. He went through a terrible ordeal. I run a stupid show.
But again, we have to repeat that. I think we have to repeat that the Daily Show did not have to do anything with my imprisonment. Yeah. They had a scenario for me, and I could be on 2.5 Men, and they could charge Charlie Sheen of sedition. Right. So
it's not as though there was anything.
And maybe Charlie Sheen is sedition.
From what I know what I know about the interrogator, what I know about Rosewater, they might have been more interesting than Charlie Sheen.
Yes, exactly.
He would have enjoyed that. The interrogator would have enjoyed that.
Yes. He was fascinated by 3 things: sex, Jews, and New Jersey.
Boom. Which is, as you know.
And we have a sexy Jew from New Jersey.
That's the Triple Crown, baby. Yeah. That's the trifecta.
Sexy Jew from New Jersey.
He's done. Guilty?
All 3 of those are my
guilty as charged.
Best friend.
What were you looking for, speaking more on that,
right,
from Rosewater? I mean, what were you looking for? What did you want us to see in this character?
Something mercurial, something, when we would talk about it, there's something very childlike. Here is somebody who is as trapped in an oppressive system as other people, not necessarily evil. His family has suffered great hardship under the Shah's regime. He's used as a weapon for physical violence and breaking people. This is an opportunity for him to step up, so he's got to be aspirational. You wanted to bring somebody in who was viewing this as an opportunity, not just for the state, but for himself. To step up in weight class, to have a VIP prisoner, a guy with sophistication, with education, to show he's not just a thug who beats people. He's got chops. He can do this. So, in fact, in the scenes where he's the most vicious to Mazhar, it's based on his own humiliation more than it is on something that Mazhar had done. He reacts to something that his boss does in the one real pivotal scene where he's the most vicious. But what I was looking for most was somebody who could bring you those characteristics of imminent violence, but within their eyes a sense of sort of a childish kind of vulnerability. And again, a very difficult line to play. It's very difficult to be that character and yet still be able to infuse it with, and I don't want to say sympathy because I don't think you let him off the hook, but a sense of understanding that there's a 3-dimensional individual under there.
Was there any kind of Stockholm Syndrome here?
No Stockholm Syndrome whatsoever, because I was trying to manipulate him. I knew that I don't like this person, I don't want to be that person, but he's a human being. He is not a monster.
Well, that's part of it. I mean, you see the humanity of the man.
That's course,
part of the Stockholm Syndrome.
I mean, I see humanity in everything. I see humanity in every person, but I don't have any kind of passion for them. I don't like them. I did not like my interrogator at all. I felt sorry for him. If that means the Stockholm Syndrome, but maybe it is. But I really felt sorry for him. That what a waste of energy, what a waste of time. That he could be a good, I don't know, bricklayer. Maybe he could be a good accountant. Maybe, I don't know, a good scientist even. Maybe he could be a good sexologist. I don't know, because
so
he was
doing
fascinating.
Something he gets no satisfaction
yes, but
from.
He was wasting his time, but beating people, humiliating people in a dark room.
Right.
And thinking that maybe he goes to paradise and get to...
But it has to take something out of you.
It does. It did. Of course. I mean, I'm talking about it with hindsight. At those times, yes, sometimes I felt angry. Sometimes I felt frustrated. Yeah. But I knew that my anger and my frustration, if I let them to exist in me, they would gnaw me from inside much more than it would hurt him. And he wanted that. So my challenge was to sublimate all the anger, all the frustration that I had inside prison to do something more positive, like the magazine article, the book, and the film.
Now, how did you see, in a sense, from the beginning and the end, this character that you're portraying, where you had to take it? In other words, from where we see him at the beginning to where we see him at the end, what is this acting journey for you?
Well, it's taking what Maziar says about sublimating all this pain and this ordeal is where it's put in the book, and in the book it was like the platform for this approach. And I've been repeating this many times that I cannot identify or even understand what Maziar went through really, because it is so complex, it is so overwhelming, and it is it is something that I've never been close to. That the only thing I can do is through empathy, through having emotional empathy, and sublimize my incorporate Maziar's let's say burst of putting everything out there into myself, putting everything out there for the character as well, for this new character that was going to be built, because definitely it is a new character. It is the film version of Maziar's story that already comes from the book, in a way.
How about the scene? Tell me about the scene where he's dancing to Leonard Cohen.
Mm-hmm.
I believe that this man's hips, I'm talking about Gael.
And me.
Let's not get crazy.
This man's hips. Take this where you
could be registered, again, with CIA, with Mossad, as weapons of mass destruction. Because he...
Does it?
It's a Mexican national treasure.
He brought it. The idea of the scene is...
to bring those hips.
What exactly? Reclaiming your humanity through almost the one antithetical device to an oppressive regime, which is dance, catharsis, and joy, and reclaim this small space. And he reclaims, if you see every wall, every piece of that cell is reclaimed, and every move past each area reclaims that as a place not of his confinement, but where he discovers his freedom. And and that's what's so liberating about it. And to see that and cut to his interrogator watching on closed circuit TV and having no idea of what this is or how to interpret it, and his befuddlement and his inability to understand that expression of joy even under these conditions.
And he must be saying to himself, I'm failing.
I honestly don't...
It is an unconquerable spirit.
I think within him there's an insecurity that always believes that, but I don't think he would have the sophistication to understand. I think it was befuddlement.
I think the main point of having Leonard Cohen in the book, during my experience and in the film, is that having a Jewish singer-songwriter from Montreal providing relief for me inside an Iranian prison. Right. That was something that was totally strange to him because, again, and that was and something that I could tap in. I knew that Leonard Cohen could provide the soundtrack of my imprisonment without anyone around me, especially the interrogator, knowing him. So Leonard Cohen not only provided the soundtrack to my imprisonment, but also he was my secret weapon, secret tool. And in fact, actually, we have Leonard Cohen in the film, and it is Leonard Cohen in the experience as well.
You know. I'm telling you, I've never been around someone whose cultural literacy is at the level of his. We would be interviewed, we've been doing this for a while and going around, and there was one journalist who Maziar was listening to him, and he says, "Where are you from?" The guy says, "I'm from Hungary." And Maziar says, "So you got out in 1956. Do you know Kessler? And they all of a sudden they start talking and going through and they start naming films and books and things, and I'm just sitting back there like, I watch the Disney Channel.
Let's talk about the televised confession. Take a look at this. Here it is.
I confess. You did nothing. Sir, I said exactly what you wanted me to say. You confessed, but nothing has changed. Sir, I did what you told me to do.
I will see to it that you rot here, dirty spy.
I'm no spies.
Your wife will never see you again.
Oh, sir.
Your child will never know you. And your mother will die broken-hearted. And you did this!
It gets funnier. That happens to be a relatively dark moment.
Did you watch movies in preparation for this?
Strangely enough, I did not. Because I had, I think, a source material that I thought was so compelling. And we mostly talked about the intention of how to articulate those scenes with the DP, Bobby Bukowski, who was phenomenal, Jerry Sullivan, who was production design. So we spent most of our time talking about not reference points, but because we had a source material in front of us and we had a script working off of, that it mostly stemmed from that. We talked a lot about tone and how to set. I wanted things more naturalistic, and I didn't want the camera to be intrusive and those kinds of things. But there was never any, I want you to Costa Gravis this up. I want to.
Well, I don't mean that. I mean just learning from it. Go see a variety of ways that approach this idea of interrogation. It's been in a lot of films, as you know.
Right.
And so is there something I like or don't like? Because I've had a lot of directors sit here and say, they watched a ton of things and incorporated something. What came out in the end was their own path that they wanted to take.
Right.
But you're saying you got there by
talking with these guys, collaboration.
Yeah. And also because I think that there was a very specific. Evin Prison is a very specific kind of prison. It's not. It's unlike any sort of torture scene I've ever seen in anything. It is
more institutionalized and bureaucratic.
Yeah, it's clean. It's a clean prison. That's something that I think everybody mentioned whenever you showed us the material. We were like, how can it be so clean? Like a prison that is clean and it feels clean. Which makes it even more.
It's an office. Yeah. It's an office building, basically. It's not a Hollywood rendition of
prison in Iran.
It is, and the most organized. And many people have died, many people have died and tortured. So, and it is. I think it was designed by the Americans in the late '60s.
Do you want to make another film? Have you even thought about that?
I haven't thought about that yet. People ask me a lot about it, but in the same way that I didn't think about making this one, I haven't thought about the next one.
I would think. I've seen where people have made films, and had successful films, and I've heard people say you really ought to get back to it right away. In other words, don't wait 5 years to make the next film. It's important.
Is that in order?
Yes, it is.
Do I have to go now?
I'm telling you.
All right,
I'm telling you, start thinking right now.
The one thing also that I want to stress, because we talked about it earlier, is, and I realize as we look at the clips, part of the thrust of the film is to also present a more nuanced view of Iranian society as a whole. We have a tendency to view it as a monolith, in the way Gael really, when he touched on that idea that it doesn't match our expectation of a Middle Eastern prison. I hope that it doesn't match our expectation of Iran either, and that we see the incredible complexity of the country, the vibrant youth movement, the educated, artistic, incredibly open, you know, especially in the first half of the movie. It's hopefully paints a very vital picture of a country that is not as easily categorized as in the axis of evil, in the same way that we're, you know, not the great Satan. Hopefully it opens a little bit more of that conversation.
And a lot of good filmmaking there as well. A lot of very good filmmakers coming out of Iran.
Yeah. Unbelievable filmmakers coming out of Iran.
Yeah. I mean, there really is a sense that this is a very interesting place. I mean, they say, and some people, I think Tom Friedman may have suggested this, that in countries in the Middle East where the government loves us the most, the people hate us the most, and where the government hates us the most, the people love us the most, i.e. America.
Of course, yeah. I think the majority of young Iranians that I know, and I think the majority of young Iranians, they love American culture, they love American ideals. Of course, they do not like some American policies in the Middle East. They do not like the fact that American government backed a coup d'etat in 1953 to topple a relatively democratic government at that time. But they love American ideals, and they love American culture. And whenever I meet American officials, I always tell them that the young Iranians are your best allies in the Middle East, and you have to find a way to communicate with them.
And what would you suggest?
I think they have to make the sanctions a little bit smarter. Do not have these blanket sanctions, because the problem with sanctions these days is that there are blanket sanctions. All companies, all banks are afraid of giving letters of credit to people who want to export even medical goods or pharmaceutical goods to Iran, even though there are no sanctions on medical goods and pharmaceutical goods. But banks, being conservative, they do not give these letters of credit. And as a result, many Iranians inside Iran see that as part of these sanctions. So what the State Department, the Treasury Department, they have to do, they have to send their bureaucrats to different banks to liaise with them, to tell them that we have sanctions on these fields. We are sanctioning human rights abusers and nuclear program. We do not have any sanctions on pharmaceutical goods, and make it. And also allow technological companies like Google, Facebook, Twitter, alleviate their fears of dealing with Iranians, because Iranians, they are using Google, Facebook, and Twitter illegally through these VPNs and filter busters. They have to go to Google, Facebook, and other technological companies and tell them that there is no punishment for dealing with Iranians. Right. Those are smart sanctions, but right now we have these blanket sanctions imposed by the American government and Western governments that are hurting Iranian people much more than the Iranian government.
There's always a question about sanctions. That is always a question about sanctions.
Yes, because they come up with the idea of sanctions, but they do not have the bureaucracy in order to implement it wisely. They should have the bureaucracy first, they should have the manpower first, and then come up with these sanctions.
And it sustains and builds the animosity, no?
Sure,
I mean, it's like in Cuba. Yeah. I mean, it's the same kind of, it's just this blanket sanctions that all of a sudden, like, just keep the struggle going.
I mean, there's an interesting fact of Iranian life is that the idea of Iran having nuclear potential, most of the Iranian people, that's not a big issue for them. And if in fact...
But it is an issue of national pride. I think if you went to the streets, people would say...
No, I agree with that totally. That's what I mean. It's an issue of national pride. I mean, they basically, if somebody would take it out, that would cause them to be much, much more hostile to the people who try to prevent them, because it is national pride. And Mousavi said that too, didn't he?
Yes, and also I think the nuclear program has to do with the behavior of the government. As you remember, Argentina had a nuclear program between 1980 and 1983 before they had democracy. South Africa, they built 6 nuclear bombs, 1960s, 1970s, and 1980s, and then as soon as they became democracies, first of all, they abandoned it. But even if South Africa had nuclear bombs right now, no one would really worry about it. If Argentina had nuclear bombs, no one would worry about it. So I think in order to change the behavior of the regime, they have to communicate with the young people of Iran. Right. They have to give this space to young Iranians to express themselves, to get the news. I mean, I've always asked Western governments to work on satellite internet, because one of the main ways to democratize Iran is to allow unfiltered internet in Iran. How much research they've done, how much work they've done, nothing.
Social media is kind of a character in this film, isn't it, a bit?
Yeah. It's a character, but it's more of a tool in it, and that's why it's you know, I think there's just a small segment that gives a nod to its power, but I didn't want it to be something that was done explicitly and characters are continually going like, it says on Twitter there's a protest on Valiasar Street. You know, we wanted it to play as subtext and not necessarily as text.
When you read recently that the president had sent a letter to the supreme leader, what do you think?
I think it's the right thing to do. The supreme leader of Iran is the leader of Iran. Iran is a very strong country in the region, and there should be negotiation. What is the alternative? Bombing Iran? Has bombing been successful in Iraq, in Afghanistan, in Libya?
We're still working on it. We'll get it right. Okay, don't be so quick to dismiss.
When you get it right, just tweet it.
That's what I'm saying.
And then we can know about it.
What's been the reaction in Iran to the film?
Very positive.
I haven't been on Rotten Baba Ganoush yet, so I don't know what the. No, they've produced some news pieces, I think, about the film and my CIA involvement and my Mossad involvement.
That you're a tool of.
They haven't
Israeli
a tool of the CIA and the Mossad. I'm one of the few people who've been accused of being Zionist and anti-Zionist. That's a Venn diagram that when it comes together, there's only like 3 of us in there. But
that's good, because I would hate it for the Revolutionary Guards to write a complimentary letter to Jon Stewart saying that death to all Jews except for Jon Stewart, and you're the only Jew that we like, and in this film you really understood our values, and it's a great film.
Yeah,
and on the other hand, I don't like that the conservatives here in this country, the hardliners in this country, neocons in this country, to like the film either. I don't like that, and I think both extremists are going to find things in the film
because they're going to find in this film that Iran doesn't fit the stereotype that they have in their mind.
That Iranians are humans.
Wasn't me coming from a kind of a neutral ground?
Yeah.
Argentina, Mexico City and Argentina.
I mean, a lot of people that have seen this film that are not from the United States or not from Iran or not from, let's say, the Western Europe, where the vision is kind of. Where the sides are clearly drawn in a sense, there is people pick up on issues that the film talks about that are nothing to do even about Iran in a way,
what?
Like torture, for example, systematical torture all over the world. The fact that the struggle and the crisis of power, how power is trying to find its way into new society and to control that, and so the issues that it talks about, and Maziar has been doing a lot of work. I mean, after his imprisonment, that has also spanned out in many other places. For example, protection of journalists, for example, which, coming where I come from, is a big, huge, mega issue, and a lot of people that saw that. From Mexico, for example, or other parts of Latin America, were picking up on that. Where they weren't picking up about the politics of picking up on a much more kind of tangible and urgent kind of sort of ordeal that the film talks about, and it's been quite interesting.
It's a universal
story. What is it saying about journalism?
Well, I think it talks about look, I think. Hopefully, if you look at it on the broader scale, it minimizes evil. It exploits ignorance. Evil is relatively rare. Ignorance is epidemic, and the cure for that is journalism and expression. And as these governments continue to try and technology is democratized, who is going to be bearing witness? The footage in the film of the gentleman being shot on the fence is Maziar's. At the time he shot it, most of the Western journalists at that point had been asked to leave or had been relegated to their hotel rooms. So he felt a responsibility as the only really professionally trained journalist still out there shooting. So he captured it and he got it uploaded. But as news organizations, as those infrastructures begin to cut back on money, you've got freelancers out there, you've got bloggers, activists, citizen journalists who are out there on their own. in incredibly dangerous situations, putting their lives on the line, in many cases their freedom on the line, to just have a witness to some of the atrocities and things that are going on within their countries and these other things. So the idea is to bring to their plight some attention. Maziar was fortunate to have Newsweek, to have international attention. It's to bring attention to their plight, and at the same time to hopefully show the unsustainability of this. When you build apparatuses within the state, and the sole purpose of that apparatus is to suppress or repress your own people, the cost of it, financially and in human capital, the state will begin to sag under that weight. And you watch it now, especially because they have to cast a much wider net. And sort of the lessons that we learned from colonialism and from empire and from all these other things that drain the resources of a state. And there's not a piece of information that could get out that would be as damaging to a state as these large bureaucratized institutions of
See,
torture.
that's what it seems to me. I mean, we've said this at the table, and I've read this.
Right.
This is about institutions.
No question.
It is about institutions and institutionalized brutality.
Right.
Interrogation.
The necessity of institutions like journalism.
Correct.
And what governments will do out of ignorance.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah. I think what happened in 2009 in Iran was that for the first time, social media played a role in social movements. Facebook and Twitter allowed people to gather information, share information, and mobilize themselves in a way that had not happened in the past.
And it went from Tehran to
Cairo, Ukraine, Hong Kong. We saw it in Brazil, and also in Ferguson. Yes, and I think that was that really frightened the governments, because they saw millions of people coming to the streets asking for their rights as citizens of the country, and at the same time they use this new tool, this new digital tool that the government was afraid of in order to mobilize themselves. Unfortunately, Google Plus was not around at that time. Otherwise, I think it would the movement would succeed.
If you could go to Iran, would you go?
I would absolutely. I would. I mean, from everything I can see, it's incredibly beautiful. Yeah. People are incredibly hospitable. It's extraordinary, artistic, educated, vibrant. I've had the food. It's delicious. Like there's not a thing about it.
No liquor there.
Other than the fact that they might not let me back out. That I would want to not. I would love to visit.
Would you worry about if you had an opportunity to go? Would you worry about not being able to get back?
I don't know that I would, but I'm also, I don't want to be naive. I know that this is probably not their favorite film.
You can probably be sure of that.
But I do hope that one day we'll be able to go. I mean,
I
want to go. I want to go.
I want to go back too.
It's not, I've never felt like this isn't against them. This isn't demonizing them. This is expressing, what they actually did to one man, but hopefully gets at something that has been occurring all over the world. This is not something you can dismiss as the singular issue of an eccentric regime.
You're taking this one story to say something much larger about what's happening around the world.
And here.
Congratulations.
Thank you, sir.
Great.
Thanks for having us.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Great to see you.
The film is called Rosewater, and it opens when, John?
Oh, Charlie. Oh, for God. Tomorrow. No.
Tomorrow.
Friday, the 14th.
Friday the 14th.
But tomorrow night, Thursday night, we're doing a big event with Stephen Colbert, simulcast.
Oh, I know about this. He's going to interview you?
He's going to interview myself and Maziar at something called Fathom Events, I think, fathomevents.com, and it's going to be in simulcast through theaters. We're going to do that as an event, show the film, and then do an interview, and then I think the next day, it opens up.
Friday the 14th.
Yeah, Friday the 14th.
Yeah. Right. And then the 3D version obviously comes out, and then IMAX, and then we take the whole thing.
And you're happy about Stephen?
It's awesome.
Turning
a
chapter in his life.
He's going to be. I'm really excited to see him untethered. It's going to be fun.
Coming over for his last show. That'll be fun.
It's going to be beautiful.
Thank you, John. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Charlie.
Thank you for joining us. See you next time. For more about this program and early episodes, visit us online at pbs.org and charlierose.com.